Today's the big day. Apparently my parents decided to schedule my birthday on the Super Bowl this year. Every year on my birthday, I like to give myself a little gift. I go back and I look at old notebooks, Word docs, and notepad files of goals that I wrote down when I was 18, 19, 20. And let me tell you, there is no better gift than seeing proof right in front of your eyes that you are becoming and have become the person that you wanted to be. I'm guessing today's not your birthday too, but there is no reason you can't start the process of giving yourself the same gift. As for me, I still got a wild imagination. So today may be my birthday, but it's also back day, and I gotta train. Enjoy the gift. Peace.
Do you track every lift? Yes, I do. Honestly, if you're doing it in the first place, why not track it? Why leave progression to random chance? That's never made any sense to me whatsoever. Anything I do, I write down what I did, and then that way, at least over time, if not the very next time, I can try to beat my effort. And by trying to beat your effort, you ensure that progressive overload happens. So yeah, I do track absolutely every lift. So the last 2 reps on this curl set got a little bit cheaty, but I actually think that this is an all-time PR on the standing curl for me, which is funny because it's my second session back doing it. Anytime that you can come back to a movement after a long time away from it and get a PR right off the bat, you know you've gained some muscle. Surefire sign. Is there any reason to not take glucose disposal agents during a fat loss period? The main one is that you just don't need it, and they're kind of expensive. So, I mean, when you're eating less food, your blood sugar should be in a good place anyway, unless you're diabetic. And if you are diabetic, you might need insulin more than you need a GDA. Worst case scenario, if you're getting very lean or eating very low amounts of food, a GDA could even make you go hypoglycemic, that is, for those who don't know. So, realistically, I just wouldn't use it on a diet unless you absolutely need it for some reason. This is a single arm rear delt fly here. I actually regressed on this movement, so what I'm going to do going forward is simply rotate this movement with a different rear delt movement, and that way I'll be doing it every 8 days instead of every 4 days, and that should be enough to get progression going again in this case. Aggression will help on a 1 rep max up to a certain point. Beyond that, you might actually go too far and disrupt your ability to be technically sound. But there's going to be an optimal level of aggression, of arousal on any lift. It's not going to be like it's quiet and calm as in a library, and it's probably not going to be a raging death murder either. How much rear delt work do you do? I only do 1 exercise that trains the rear delts directly for 1 set. I also do rowing and pull downs, and any kind of row where you're bringing your elbows behind your body is going to train your rear delts. As you will see, the next rowing variation that I have coming up does exactly that. It's on the strive row, and you'll see that my elbows are positioned maybe at a 45-degree angle relative to my torso. They come fully behind the body, and that is training the rear delts. Here is the aforementioned strive row, and you can see it's definitely training my rear delts here. Do you believe the anecdotal claims that 19 NORs cause permanent neurological fog or impairment? All supraphysiological doses of androgenic and anabolic steroids are neurodegenerative in the long term. All of them, even testosterone. Now, 19 NORs specifically, such as tren and deca, may actually enhance the rate of amyloid plaque buildup, which is linked to neurological disorders like Alzheimer's. But, I mean, you're not going to get to the point where, you're losing 20 IQ points or something. It's not going to change your functional intelligence. Is it weird that my upper body is able to progress for 6 weeks before a stall, and my lower body can only progress for 4 weeks before a stall? Not really. Every muscle typically has a different SRA curve, which is why you have to prioritize things when you make a split. For example, my chest and shoulders are completely different. Shoulders probably only need 3 or 4 days for recovery for me, and my chest needs 5. So what I do is I keep my chest volume very low, and I keep things very recoverable so that I can train my shoulders every 4th day, because shoulders are a bigger priority. So this isn't unusual. It's just you can consider, for example, making your upper body programming a little harder. Stupid people exist? Or is there supposed to be more to this question? I mean, what causes hypertrophy then? Does a little fairy fly around and go, you get some gains, and it's just completely random?
Hypertrophy is caused by mechanical tension. Mechanical tension is caused by lifting in close proximity to failure. Lifting makes you have bigger muscles. Bigger muscles are capable of more force production. So if you keep lifting the same weight forever, eventually that weight becomes easy and it no longer produces mechanical tension and it no longer produces more hypertrophy. You always, in the long run, have to either add reps or weight to maintain proximity to failure. If not, where's all the IFBB pros who are marathon runners? Those guys take millions of strokes with their legs, right? Millions of steps. Where's all the guys with jack legs that do marathons? Where's all the people that lift 3-pound ping dumbbells and just do push-ups? You see? Now, you don't have to logbook if you don't want, but then you're just leaving it to random chance. Second point on this. All the people that say this are exclusively enhanced. They're all using multiple grams of gear, lots of GH, 5, 6, 7, 8,000 calories of food. And most of them have good to great genetics as well. And the reason why they believe this is because if you have all of those things in place, 3 grams of gear, 8,000 calories, programming is not that important in the grand scheme of things. You can pretty much just exist, go to the gym, train anywhere near failure, and grow. And this is why you have to be careful of the sources that you take information from. And sometimes it's better to listen to people who are natural or at least still work with naturals because they still understand that training and programming matter. At a certain point, certain enhanced people literally forget, and this question is evidence of that programming is a thing. They don't even program. They just eat so much food and take so much drugs that progress happens no matter what. What situations for a powerlifter would you suggest your devolume method versus using a traditional deload? Well, if you actually think about it, powerlifting already has devolume and it's called peaking. In a peak, you keep intensity very high, max effort doubles, singles, triples for very low volume. And that allows you to maintain adaptations close to your 1 RM while letting a ton of fatigue dissipate. So in a way, peaking protocols for powerlifting are already devolumes, and that is the main application for powerlifting that I see. I probably would not use them in other normal training situations. Are Prime and Strive 2 different equipment companies, or did one just rebrand itself? As far as I know, Strive made equipment in the 80s. They either went out of business or they were sold. And Prime now owns the patents to their cam system that has the 3 different loading pegs. So it's really the same company in the grand scheme of things. Prime is just all the new equipment, and the Strive stuff was made in like the 80s and 90s. Quick note here, I guess, about the hammer pullover since I have time. This movement is really tempting to just put on as much weight as possible and then throw it short using a ton of momentum because it's so short biased, it's so disproportionately hard at lockout compared to the stretch position, and it's just a terrible strength curve, to be honest with you. I don't know why hammer strength makes everything short biased. Because it's so short biased and you strengthen the short fatigues first, I may actually have to put this earlier in the session to progress it well. You can still use mind-muscle connection on compounds. I would just question the appropriateness of doing so. Like, are you really bench pressing and focusing on your chest just so that you only use your chest or use your chest as much as possible on bench press? Or are you bench pressing for shoulders, chest, and triceps? Similarly, it's really technique that matters the most. Like, if you're doing squats for your quads, you need to keep your knees forward and shove them forward. Don't allow your hips to come back. I would even potentially cue, something like hips forward so that you stay in your quads. If you just squat as much weight as possible and don't care how you do it, your body will just essentially use the mechanics that are most suited to your strengths and weaknesses. So keep that in mind. I mean, more often than not, you're doing compounds to train multiple movements, but there still is a main muscle that's an emphasis. So technique is going to matter, and execution is going to matter a lot more than mind-muscle connection on a compound where you're trying to train multiple things. You said 6-month hypertrophy cycles were inappropriate for all but advanced athletes, but I spend 8 months-ish of the year hypertrophy training. Why is this not ideal if I'm still doing SBD year-round? I think you just misunderstood what I meant. I meant that you don't need to be doing a 6-month straight block of hypertrophy training with limited or no comp-specific variations in there.
Intermediate powerlifters can use a concurrent model, which is exactly what you're doing, where they go for hypertrophy and a little bit of comp specificity at the exact same time. And then closer to a meet, they go for a lot of comp specificity and they still keep some hypertrophy work in there as well. So we're just not talking about the same thing. Why do you recommend Mike Israetel's books if you do not use his training system? You train the exact opposite way. Because Mike's books help you to understand what causes hypertrophy. And from there, you can make your own decisions about programming. If you understand the underlying mechanisms, it's not hard to make decisions to progress your own training based on the things that you are seeing. And that's why I said practical application will always require an extensive base of experience, because you can read about ideas all day, but until you come into real world scenarios that force you to problem solve, you won't know how to apply those ideas. So yes, even though I use failure training, I still constantly think about concepts like SFR, stimulus to fatigue ratio, and I use my understanding of how hypertrophy occurs to make programmatic adjustments. And those are concepts that I think Mike in particular explains better than anyone else out there right now. About half the time that they study mind-muscle connection, it makes no difference whatsoever to hypertrophy outcomes. Yes, you cannot PR every time. That is not an argument against logbooking. That's an argument for programming, to intelligently periodize your training so that you can set regular PRs rather than leaving it up to random chance. This is just, again, like I said, people who don't understand training but understand drugs, nutrition, and they rely on those for all their progress. Have you tried self-control? So right now I got 2,200 followers on this account. I know I'm about to lose like 3,500 of them when I say this, but I don't like Star Wars. I've tried multiple times as a kid and as an adult. I just am not into it. I don't know why. So I'm going to assume that creatine is not a euphemism for trend or DECA for test, and that you're talking about actual creatine monohydrate. You never need to cycle off creatine. It has benefits outside of lifting as well. I never stopped taking it ever. I've probably been taking it for 10 plus straight years. I apologize as both a real fitness professional and a completely fake medical doctor. I do not know much about the interactions between training and antidepressants. So, yeah, sorry, I can't even refer you out to somebody who might know more about that. I'm really just not sure. Maybe I could do some research on this and get back to you.
So I think it's part bro mythology, bro terminology, and part fact or phenomenon. There's definitely a real thing that muscle maturity is describing. A lot of bodybuilders put on most of the size that they're ever going to put on in the first half of their career, but with each presentation year after year, there tends to be a different quality to the look, of more detail, more hardness, and that is what people are talking about when they're talking about muscle maturity. Now, is that actually because the muscle has gotten older and you've held it for longer, or is that due to continued hypertrophy of select fibers that you are now, getting to the point where you're truly coming upon the limit of hypertrophying every fiber in those muscles? I have no idea what causes the phenomenon, but it is a real thing.
Does ass coming off bench a little bit matter? It does matter to some degree because you're changing the angle of the press, which changes the muscular recruitment pattern. You can turn an incline into a flat press if you lift your ass high enough. So I'd essentially, for tracking purposes, write down that you did a cheat rep if your ass comes off the bench on the final rep or two, and it doesn't on the rest of them. Because again, like I said, it's a way of actually training past failure and making it more flat or more decline, which improves your leverages, it changes the muscular recruitment, and allows you to get those extra reps. You can even see here on this incline, on the last few, my butt comes up, and I count those as cheat reps. Our 1 second low bar squats in highish rep range, 8 to 15, 7 to 15, okay. I don't think that's a good hypertrophy exercise. I think you're kind of bastardizing something that's specific and something that's good for hypertrophy and trying to turn it into one thing. In my experience, when you're farther away from a meet, you can afford to pick exercises that are the best for hypertrophy. And what I've noticed in a lot of longer limbed powerlifters like yourself is that quad strength is going to be the limiting factor. And for a somewhat powerlifting specific movement, I love the safety bar squat with a ton of heel elevation. In my experience, it's just as good as high bar for targeting the quads, if not even maybe slightly better, and it comes without any of the elbow and shoulder distress that a normal bar brings.
If I could start over, would I? I don't know what you're talking about, so you're going to assume life. No, no way. I think this is ungrateful, maybe even disrespectful to the blessings that you've received in your life, whatever you want to call them, and the people that you've got in your life. It's almost like saying, yeah, I guess you're pretty good, this is pretty good. But if I could start over, I would definitely make choices to ensure that I end up with something better than you. I mean, again, super big lack of gratitude there. If you feel this way, it's probably because you're not doing all that you can with the one chance you do have. So, you can start over, but you can start over right now and start living the way that you want to live before you die. When you use a wide grip on deadlift, such as what you might use in a snatch grip deadlift, you are effectively shortening the length of your arms. And what that's going to do is it's going to force you to start in a more bend over position, and you're going to have to lock out higher up than you normally do. The muscles of the back act isometrically in pretty much any deadlift variation. You're not going through a concentric or an eccentric. The muscles aren't lengthening and shortening. What they do in deadlifts is they act isometrically to hold your posture. And when you have shorter arms, they have to work against more load when at the end of the day after the physics calculations are done. So it's harder for those muscles to maintain posture, which is often why you'll see when people do things like snatch grip deadlifts, they end up rounding their back more easily than when they use their normal grip width. So it's not going to change the musculature that's being used, it's just going to make it harder for the posture to hold up. Big thank you to everyone who took the time to wish me a happy birthday. I just picked one of these randomly, but there was a bunch of them. So thank you to all of you. That'll be the last of the questions for today. Hopefully I'll get this edited sometime before bed, and I will catch you all tomorrow. I have legs.
As always, everyone, thanks for watching. If you liked it, like it. If you have something to say, go to the comments, share it if you think it's worth sharing, and have a good day. Until next time.